What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to another episode of Good, Bad, and Ugly, the show where we pick apart some of the movies that are going around today. Yeah, we're like doing current events and shit like that. So the movie on the chopping block today is Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. I saw this movie a few days ago. Just for reference, I have not seen Ant-Man 1 and 2 all the way through. I think I know their basic premise, and I learned a lot from the other Marvel movies, but I might be missing some details, so please don't hate me. And I just want to start off by saying I did think this movie was good. Overall, I thought it was good. I thought it was better than Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Definitely. I thought this movie was funnier. I thought it was a little bit better paced. There were some things that I didn't quite like, but I'll get into those later. Let's start out with some of the things that I did like. The first thing that really jumped out to me is that the comedy, like especially the Marvel brand comedy, really works in a movie like Ant-Man. I think Scott and even Cass, his daughter, they both have like that awkward, quippy, but still able to be serious in some moments, and the Marvel comedy really works for them. Maybe Marvel thought that Ant-Man's comedy was like the gold standard, but the comedy does just come from the characters. It doesn't feel like it comes from the writers as much. Because of that, it is funnier to me. I'm also pretty partial to Paul Rudd. He's one of my favorite actors. I think he's really funny. I really enjoy everything he's in, and he himself was enough to carry me through some of the dull moments of the movie. There were some long, drawn-out scenes that, I don't know, I think he really, if he wasn't there, I would have given this movie a lower score. And speaking of slow, the movie did start out kind of slow in, like, the first act. The second act picked up a little bit, and the third was really good. Obviously, there's a giant fight sequence and battle scene in the third act. That's always how Marvel movies are. But this one stood out to me especially. Apparently, there were some callbacks to the older Ant-Man movies. Generally, the cinematography and just the thematic elements really shined in that moment. I don't know if it was intentional, because I don't have a lot of faith in the Marvel writers at the moment, but no, there were some generally awesome scenes that I was like, wow, like that's cool. I think the reason why the first act was so bad was because it was trying to like shoehorn itself into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and like it was trying to tie itself to the overarching like timeline of events. This is supposed to be the movie that kicks off Phase 5 of Marvel. I don't really know what constituted Phase 4, but yeah, I don't know. I thought it was like a pretty okay start to Phase 5, but I kind of wish that they didn't have to tie themselves to the Marvel Cinematic Universe so that the movies could just kind of stand on their own, because this movie, once it got rolling and once it got its concepts established, it really shined towards the end. One thing in particular that I liked about the third act was the ant colony when Ant-Man is in the Chamber of Probability. Without giving too many spoilers, there's some awesome symbolism with like ants and wasps and stuff, and it is kind of cheesy, but it's cool to see these characters get grounded again. You know, when you think of Ant-Man, you kind of think of him being big and small, but seeing a bunch of Ant-Men like forming a colony was cool. I like that. And the last thing in the good category, I don't think it was especially good, not as good as people are saying it is, but the villain, Kang, a lot of people said that he shined and really carried the movie, but I think he was kind of underutilized. I did think he was really threatening, and I was curious to learn more about him, but they didn't really give you that, and I know they're setting up future movies, but I would have liked to see kind of more of his capabilities besides characters just saying, oh, he destroys universes, and he's, you know, he's evil. It's like, okay, like, show me. I mean, and also it did seem like he was kind of like a wholesome guy who was just driven by his own ambitions instead of just being pure evil. So I wish we kind of got to either dig more into his character or into like his past deeds and showing us from our context what it means to like destroy a timeline or destroy a universe, because to me that's just like, I just imagine like a giant explosion. I don't really imagine anything in particular. Like in Star Wars, when they destroyed planets, they actually showed like the people on the planets like having 5 seconds to cope with their doom. You know, they really don't give that same kind of feel in like Marvel. I know it's not the best way to look at Marvel by comparing it to Star Wars, but you know, they're both made by Disney and they're both kind of formulaic at the moment. I think it's okay to kind of look into it from that perspective. Alright, and with all the good stuff out of the way, let's dig into the bad stuff. I know that's the stuff you guys want to hear about. What do I think sucked about this movie? Well, I already talked about this before, but the first act, there was so much standing around, there was barely any action, and I understand you have to have some kind of dialogue and exposition and introduction, but it felt like there was just so much walking around, especially when the gang gets like separated in the beginning of the movie. Scott and Cass were off doing their own thing, but like the rest of them were just kind of standing around, so much so that it felt like they were in like a giant green room or something. We'll talk about that later. A lot of people didn't like Cass, but I do want to give her some credit. I thought that she was really a cool character, again, once she got rolling, but I think the whole child prodigy and, like, you know, hyper-intelligent kid thing has just been overused so many times in Marvel now. I mean, you had Tony Stark and you had Spider-Man. Once you start adding in these other characters, like the people from Black Panther or the people from Ant-Man now, it kind of devalues that intelligence. And a lot of people would be excited to see Tony Stark return, but I'm not really sure what he could offer because the technology has surpassed him, you know? It's like his time is over. He kind of walks so that the rest of Marvel could run. And a lot of these characters are based out of the comics, so they could be just preparing for something even bigger. It just doesn't really make sense to me that a character like MODOK can't find his way out of the quantum realm, but a girl, Cass, can just watch some videos and construct some, you know, magical device to talk to the quantum realm. Maybe I'm looking too deep into it, guys. You'll have to let me know in the comments. Another character that people really didn't like, and I agree with this sentiment, I do not like this character, Janet. She's just so annoying, and she's like a total cliche when it comes to, like, you know, the mysterious lady who, you know, she has all these secrets and blah, blah, blah. We've seen this before. Like, it's not super creative. They just played up that whole secrecy thing too much, and it didn't really seem believable. Especially considering how, like, closely knit their family is, and I understand that she was gone for 30 years, but I figured there would be a little bit more that she would tell her family, you know? 30 years out in the wilderness, you got some stories, man. You haven't really been around people all that much. It was just kind of weird to me. I don't know if I'm really describing it the way I'm seeing it in my head, but there was also a pretty lengthy exposition in the second act, which really, like, added to the dislike of her character. She was just droning on and on about the 30 years she spent in the quantum realm. It just went on for a while, and I don't know. They could have cut it shorter or maybe interpolated with some, you know, action from someone else, which I think they kind of did that, but, like, I don't know. I just felt like I was sitting there for a while. She also meets up with Bill Murray, who is implied very, very not subtly to be like an ex-lover of hers. Again, they don't really show any of that in her flashbacks. All they do is just kind of make weird references that makes me and the other characters on screen uncomfortable. That's one of my big problems with this movie, is that everything subtle is just not subtle at all. Like, they have to over-explain everything. Also, her interactions with the CGI were terrible. She really didn't know how to act with CGI, and maybe that's not her fault, but, like, dude, it really just added fuel to the Janet hate train for me. And just the dialogue in general wasn't very convincing, especially when they were, like I said, interacting with CGI, or they were, like, in the suits. I know there was a particular scene where Ant-Man and the Wasp were, like, talking to each other, and they were just completely expressionless in their suits. They were like, you know, "Can you hear me? Are you excited?" It was very obviously dubbed over. If not, then they were just poorly acting because they didn't think it would show up in the movie. I don't know. Two more of the not-so-subtle things were the constant referral to Kang as him. It was just like, dude, like, shut up. It's so irritating when it's just so forced in the movie. Like, nobody talks like that. If you were to be referring to someone mysterious as him, you'd think one of the characters, especially considering how outgoing and quippy they are, would have something to say about, you know, him. I felt like I was being very lazily strung along when they could have at least referenced Kang by name earlier in the movie, just to break it up so it didn't seem so repetitive. And I think my biggest problem with the movie as a whole is just that it feels so formulaic, like they just kind of cranked this one out. You know, the acting wasn't super convincing, the editing wasn't super great, the CGI wasn't that great, and judging by Disney's recent actions, it probably was just kind of cranked out as like an easy film, you know? I mean, when I make videos, I kind of categorize them between like the ones that take more effort and the ones that don't take more effort, and you can tell by my demeanor and my facial expressions which one it is, because, you know, just being in that mindset of like, this is an easy ride, really kind of takes the intensity out of you, for better or for worse. Barring all of the future multiversal stuff, I really was kind of excited that they weren't trying to shoehorn the multiverse into this movie. I think the multiverse as a concept has just been sucked dry, like, in the last couple years. It's so crazy how everybody has jumped on this multiverse thing. It's like a buzzword that everybody needs a piece of. Maybe it's just annoying to me personally, but just hearing that they're going to continue with this multiverse stuff, it just seems kind of lazy, because they can just do whatever they want with it. They're trying to have like an overarching narrative throughout the entire like Marvel Cinematic Universe, but nobody dying matters, nobody doing anything matters, because you could just hop over to another universe and do something, you know? They've done it before, so like, why can't they just do it again? And that is where Kang gets pretty interesting, because he does have the ability to travel between universes, but he needs his like special ship, which literally one of the Avengers and some friends were able to take out. I guess it'll be interesting to see what Kang does, because characters now can't just hop from universe to universe without escaping the evil presence looming over them. Another trope that I have a problem with is putting like a Valkyrie type character in every single Marvel movie. Valkyrie, if you don't know, is from Thor. She's this like strong female warrior type. You know, she's cool, but it feels like they just kind of slapped her onto this other character. I don't even remember her name, but you know, she's the exact same archetype. It almost feels like they just kind of did it so that they could like reuse Lego parts or something, you know? My last criticism in the bad category is, this is a kind of spoiler, so if you don't want to be kind of spoiled, go la 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 for 10 seconds or just like skip ahead. MODOK. Why did they do what they did to MODOK? It seems like Marvel is only including these characters in their movies to either shoehorn them into like a giant movie in the future by like having a tiny cameo, or they just want to drive people to come see the movie. But with like MODOK, oh my gosh, man, the CGI looked terrible. He should have just kept the mask on. His character was treated like he was super stupid. He's supposed to be this menacing, freakish, freaking intelligent monster, and he's just a big goofball. And they kill him. It's so annoying. I don't know how much of that rant I'm gonna include in the video. Probably not too much because of spoiler's sake, but yeah. MODOK, I was super excited when I saw him. I didn't know he was gonna be in the movie, but I was very disappointed with what they did with him. Now on to the ugly category, which is my personal favorite because we get to critique the editing, cinematography, the CGI, all of the logistics of the movie that make it look good or ugly. And this movie looks ugly, man. Come on. I alluded to this earlier, but the CGI was really bad, especially with like the creatures that they were interacting with. The actors didn't do a good job of selling that they were in the environment that they were in, and they also didn't do a good job of interacting with that environment. One particular shot that comes to mind is Janet touching that manta ray thing. She's literally just stroking a freaking green wall. Also, another scene with Janet was when, in that flashback, she was throwing Kang's ship core. She, like, scooped it downwards, but then in the next scene, it was, like, moving outwards. It just didn't flow very well. In editing, you have to pay a lot of attention to motion and getting those different perspectives to flow and stuff like that. And they just completely dropped the ball. Kind of funny because so did Janet. She threw the ball. I think the editing could have been touched up just a little bit. And oh boy, we're talking about it. The green screen rooms. I cannot tell you how many times, especially in the beginning of this movie, that I was pulled out of the movie. I was completely de-immersed because of how horrible the green screen looks when they're walking around. When it's just people and CGI on the screen, it doesn't work. Like, you need to have them actually doing something or interacting, not just walking around. It really sucks because, like, I know it doesn't matter to a lot of people, but to me, I pick up on that stuff, and it just sucks me out of the movie. You know, the movie could be great, but something like that, all I see is just people walking around in a big warehouse. And it doesn't help that in the first act, there's a lot of medium shots, and there's a lot of super flat terrain, so they're literally just walking across the floor with, like, a very basic-ass camera angle. Again, just all part of the immersion. You gotta really convince people that you're in the world. Use some interesting shots, some interesting close-ups. Even if they would have framed the screen with some kind of like tree or tentacles or something, that would have made a difference. When the camera is up close on people interacting, I first noticed this where Scott and Cass were like talking with the resistance group with like the whole guy and the Valkyrie lady. That looked good. I mean, even though the characters were touched up and the background was CGI, it did look pretty good because there was action taking up most of the screen. Coming back to MODOK, specifically talking about his CGI, it just looked terrible. I think they should have just kept the mask on him completely because the face just looked too goofy, and he wasn't like menacing enough. He just looked like a normal guy with a big head. They could have even like made his eyes white or something. I know in the comics they have him looking like that sometimes. I know I said that I really liked the way that the Quantum verse looked, but I do think they could have pushed it a little bit further. So many of the Marvel movies now take place in outer space or in wacky universes with wacky characters and stuff. They could have just had maybe a little more consistency in the character design. It didn't look very stylized either. Everything just looks very hyper-realistic, like, you know, that's what you would see if you went to the Quantum verse in real life. I was definitely entertained and wowed by some of the quirks of the Quantum universe, but I do feel like they could have pushed it just a little bit further to separate it from Star Wars and Guardians of the Galaxy and Avatar and Thor and all of these other movies where they're start going to all these, you know, crazy destinations. I think the character design was a little weak in some spots, especially considering that, like, the main characters kind of wear street clothes the entire time. I did really like the design of some of those aliens and how they were used. Like, the hole guy was cool, and the cannon head guy where he, like, shoots lasers. That was awesome. We need to see more of that kind of stuff. And the humans living down in the Quantumverse too, they all just had the same kind of barbarian cyberpunk look that we've seen over and over again. But yeah, overall, I did like Ant-Man. I thought it was fun. I thought it was funny, especially Scott / Paul Rudd. I thought he did a really good job as the Ant-Man character. He really embodies that character, like, because that's kind of how he is in a lot of his other roles, but it also seems like that's how he is in real life. Like, he just seems like a really cool guy. Overall, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania gets between a good in a good way and a good in a bad way. The good in a bad way comes from the fact that the movie overall just seems very formulaic. I think a lot of the CGI and editing were rushed. I've heard a lot about the Disney VFX people being overworked, so I send condolences to you for having to put out subpar products if that is the case. If not, then maybe put a little bit more time and a little bit more refinement into those movies. This is the same thing with Wakanda Forever. I think just like another couple weeks in the editing room would have made a huge difference in this movie. Just getting everything frame perfect, you know, making everything flow really nicely, cutting out some unnecessary stuff, really would have put this movie a lot higher up on my list. And the good in a good way does come from the comedy. I think the comedy really lands. I think the story as a whole was pretty well constructed, even though it wasn't very well executed. And I am kind of looking forward to seeing where Kang goes, and I am excited to see more Ant-Man. I mean, I really like him. He's a cool superhero. And that's about going to do it for this video, guys, so do leave a comment below, like and subscribe. If you disagree with me, leave a dislike and leave a comment as to why. If you do agree with me, then share some of your sentiments in the comments below and have respectful discussions with each other. I gotta shout out the Instagram. I've been posting on there more, so yeah, if you want to see bonus content from me, Instagram's the place to be, man. Alright, with all that out of the way, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.